Just want to do a quick Super Sunday on discernment and accountability related to Glen Saffer, Donna Sexton, Active Patriot, James Goddard and Nobby Robinson. Before we get on to all that, there's a brave lad making videos called Tommy Nobbinson. He's putting his voice out there, although distorted, he's putting himself on the line. Not sure if he's another ex-Tommy follower, but he's begun to start questioning things, so give him a sub, links below. We'll start off on Active Patriot. We're going to praise and thank him for acting swiftly. We reported on a convicted groomer who had donated a laptop to Active Patriot. At least a couple of lads wanted us to know, and I assume they wanted us to mention that Active Patriot distanced himself from the groomer Peter Rider of Norwich immediately and condemned him, as well as changed his policy on donations. He's refusing to accept donations from people who are unknown to him to prevent something like this from happening again in the future. We applaud Active Patriot for putting this measure in place, and we applaud him for condemning the groomer. Our video mentioning Active Patriot was in no way criticising him. We were simply bringing up the fact that there's groomers walking amongst the Patriot and the Tommy movement, going about unchecked, and we listed 2 or 3 groomers who have been caught. We're asking people to be vigilant, and those taking donations need to check if they received anything at all from Peter Rider of Norwich. Remember the name, Peter Rider of Norwich, a convicted groomer. Moving on to Glen Saffer. Mr Saffer, as far as we're aware, has not made a public statement on the Norwich man Peter Rider. We've asked him to check his records, to go through the archives. We've asked Mr Saffer to check to see if he's had any contact at all with the convicted groomer Peter Rider of Norwich. They're both Norwich based, hence why we asked him to check his archives and his records. Because he was following Active Patriot, chances are he would have been following Glen Saffer, Tommy and others in this quote-unquote movement, and perhaps even donated to Tommy and others. The other point concerning Mr Saffer is there's a picture that's come to our attention which seems incriminating somewhat, as Mr Saffer is pictured with a token called Morpheus, who's gone off radar. Morpheus was flogging a book about himself which was also promoting the quote-unquote church. As a way to advertise the book, Mr Morpheus said he will buy houses for grooming victims with the profits from the book sales. We're asking Mr Saffer to check to see if the profits were actually used to house grooming victims, because this seems rather slapdash and pie in the sky if you ask us. How is some little known fella like Morpheus flogging a book about himself? How's that going to raise enough money to buy a house, a singular house? Never mind plural houses, which he suggested.
Anyways, guys, this book is out, as you know, but you can only obtain it from me at the moment. It's not active on Amazon. A signed copy, £12, which includes postage. I'm hoping to raise enough cash through this so I can, before I die, so I can have a few houses established in the UK to help others, right? I want to help is the ones, the white girls and the Sikh girls that are being, what I want to do, that's what's in my heart, and I want to put all of those properties in a trust, so after I die, that is still happening. Okay, that is my heart desire.
The question here is, how much profit was generated and what's it being used for, Mr Saffer? You've got to take ownership of this, Mr Saffer. Just like when Major Simon Bean, MBE, took ownership and made sure Morpheus's attempt to raise 18 grand or so was paid back in full, all paid back to the donors, as he did not raise enough money on GoFundMe, and he went quiet on it, so Mr Simon Bean had to get involved after concerns were passed on to him.
Now, I phoned Mo yesterday, spoke to him at length, and I asked him if he could email me a receipt of that money being paid back to the 72 individuals by GoFundMe. He sent me the receipt, and GoFundMe basically turned around and said all monies have been refunded and the account is now closed.
That fella Morpheus was a weird one. He's gone off radar now, but did he really think wearing a pair of sunglasses was some sort of disguise? You never saw him without those sunglasses on, even when he was sitting indoors. It was weird.
Now, I've worked covertly, and it takes more than a pair of dark glasses in a dark room to disguise yourself when you're trying to avoid other people, albeit trying to avoid being identified by the wrong people. So something ain't right. There's hiding in plain sight, and then there's delusional paranoia, Mo, and I think you're bordering on the second one.
If Mr Saffer wants to be seen as credible and show us a level of accountability, he's got to be able to furnish us with information on the profits from those book sales. You've got to be able to do that, Mr Saffer, especially considering that he's been rubbing shoulders with fraudsters. The latest convicted fraudster is a benefit cheat, according to Resisting Hate, and her name is Donna Sexton. That name may ring a bell, especially amongst the Tommy crowd. Donna and her father alone raked in £250,000. That's $500,000. That was all benefit fraud or some other form of fraud. She was convicted and jailed for 4 years for benefits fraud and money laundering. Have a read of the breakdown by Resisting Hate. Don't bother about the site, but focus on the facts and the evidence elucidated, and all the relevant links are on that site. You've got to be able to do your own investigations and don't just dismiss it because it's on a particular site that you don't like. We're against anybody who takes money from the British taxpayers illegally, so we're going to call this out all day long. Penultimately, we've seen folks goading Mr James Goddard about his ex, Miss Simon, Ashley Simon, being in a relationship with Mr Paul Golding. That's not on. People using that to try and get under Mr Goddard's skin should desist. It's immature. They've got to stop this immediately. These immature comments are not helpful at all. Mr Golding is a grifter. Whether you like it or not, that's a fact, and you should be able to use your energy to question and raise awareness about the grifting and other serious problems within Britain First. You've got to leave Mr Goddard alone. Whatever you say about him, he's not taking thousands in donations from unassuming and naive British people. Last but not least, there's an update on Nobby Robinson. He's been released, but if anybody was as shocked as us by the brutal manner in which the Kent Police took Mr Robinson into custody, you can do what we did and lodge a formal complaint as per our last video. Go and check that out if you need some assistance on how to lodge a formal complaint. You've got to stay safe, everybody, and you've got to remember, iron sharpens iron just as one man sharpens another. We've all got to stay united against wrong uns, and we've all got to call folks out to accountability, especially when donations are involved. Don't be afraid to use any discernment skills that you've developed and question folks. At this ministry, we aim to train your powers of discernment so you can become a force for positive change in your community. A tip is always to check if there's accountability and transparency around anybody who's asking for donations.
Different like that. I will say this though, that the donations apparently have gone down to whatever. He's now doing other things to keep himself financed, but that's not my business. So
Well, it seems like a real dead end to me, and there's a lot of people who are very, very angry with him, and frankly his time in British nationalism might well be over.
Well, publish everything. I mean, if you want people to calm down, make yourself transparent, or just say, though, I'm not, and accept what happens. As I say, Tommy does his thing, I do my thing.